A family in turmoil during the Chinese Communist Revolution. Does this bold attempt at a debut novel pull it off? Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Spineless Books, your one-stop spoiler-free shop for all things audiobook. The Daughters of Shandong by Eve J. Chung is a book that I recently picked up for a book club. And honestly, I'm really grateful for book clubs, because often because of book clubs, I pick up books that I would never read otherwise. And this is one of those examples. This is not a book that would have attracted me, and this is not a book I would have thought to read. Yet, I've read it. This book is set in the 1940s when communism is taking root in China. Many of the wealthy were being punished by the Communist Army because they were confiscating land and wealth in order to redistribute things to facilitate communism. So, members of the Chung family who have been successful business people and employ many in their community are a huge target for the communists when they come around to seize land. Now, the members of the Chung family are no fools. At least some of them aren't. So when the patriarch and his mother decide to flee and abandon his wife and children, they are left to their own devices, and this becomes a survival story. The young mother has been someone who's cared for many of her neighbors, so those very same neighbors warn her that the communists are coming to seize her home, and she makes the choice to flee with her 3 young kids. Now, Hai, the eldest daughter, is about 11 when this begins, and Dee is roughly 10. And then there's Lan, who is really just an infant, or maybe a toddler at this point, but she's young nonetheless. They take what they can carry and they flee their home, seeking safety. But little do they know that's not the easiest thing to find right now. The women are hoping to make it to Taiwan, where they believe they can be safe. But they are exposed to some of the most unimaginable hardships. Eating garbage, living in a closet, being completely homeless, being abused by the communist soldiers. There is so much that these women take on, and it is such an ordeal, it's almost not to be believed. The thing is, you have to believe this story because the author has based this novel on her own grandmother's experience. Now, she fully acknowledges that there are things about this that are fictional, and in fact, there are entire characters that come from her imagination. But the bulk of this story and its framework comes from her grandmother's experience. Chung did tons of research in order to back up her grandmother's story. And in fact, it turns out that women being abandoned by their patriarch and left in life-threatening circumstances because of their socioeconomic status was actually not all that uncommon at this time. In spite of the emotional trauma and the loss of stability, these characters forge ahead against all odds. Chung's adaptation of the story focuses on survival and adaptation and resourcefulness as these women, this mother and her young children, seek stability in an incredibly unstable world. They develop a strategy all while navigating societal upheaval. Even though this story is grounded in the realism of Chung's own grandmother, she has added so much more to this account. This really becomes a story of women pioneering and forging ahead against all odds, of mothers and daughters, and also of sisters, a part of the story that I really wouldn't have expected to be so strong in a historical fiction novel. The character arcs in this book really face head-on the long-term effects of this emotional trauma. These women are going through a harrowing experience, so it's reasonable to assume that their reactions are not just limited to the time period where they're in this experience, but this is something they will carry with them the rest of their lives. I particularly enjoyed the way that Chung handled the way relationships evolved or devolved in some cases based on this emotional trauma that these women experienced, because it was deep. The book allows you, the reader, to experience all of the complex reactions that these women have, because as much as they go through these situations together, they're all very different people. So their reactions to the trauma and the experience is also very different. I felt as though each character truly had an authentic transformation, and I got to follow the roots of why certain things happened, and I appreciated watching their growth and the way that some of the things that they experienced altered the way they handled things in the future. While there is no direct factual reporting in this book, the experiences are presented with an authenticity that has a respect for lived experiences within a historical context. Though there are some characters, like Lan, the youngest sister, who lack a direct voice in the story, she helps add context to the struggle, as this was a real thing that the mother was dealing with. She had a young child who she had to tend to, in spite of all of this craziness, starvation, and abandonment. Narrator Shu Li Alice Chen did an excellent job with the narration. I really appreciated her ability to delineate between the mother's voice and that of the two young girls, although some of that is a credit to the great dialogue that Chung has written. But Chen has done an amazing job with this narration as well, because each of the characters really grew in an arc as everything went on in the story. We follow girls from really young girls to women, and they develop their voice in the book, both literally and figuratively. I felt as though Chen allowed the girls to have an arc vocally, which I thought was really impressive. She also did an excellent job of voicing slightly more minor characters, like the girl's grandmother, their father's mother, who really is an archetype of an old way of thinking about things. And you can hear the anger and the fury in her voice every time she speaks, because she just cannot relate to where her daughter-in-law and her granddaughters are coming from. She doesn't understand what they've been through, and she's holding hard to an old way of doing things. I thought the way that the girl's behavior towards this staunch attitude adjusted throughout the book was really an impressive detail that kind of brought things home for me. You could understand how in the beginning of the book they felt one way towards their grandmother, but having lived through these experiences, there was just no way they could see her the same. Some of the most heated emotional moments in the story came out of this relationship, and I thought Chen did a phenomenal job with how she handled that difficult narration. I have to say, I am definitely impressed with this as a debut novel. Is this the strongest historical fiction I've ever read? No. Is it the most sophisticated? Not that either. But Chung's ability to lead you through a character's journey with excellent pacing and well-edited moments was really impressive. And on top of that, the dynamics and depth that she made commentary about, like mothers and daughters and sisters, was really very well developed, especially for a debut. I found myself less concerned with what would happen next in the story and more with how were these characters going to be. I was empathizing with the people and less worried about the plot, and I think that really tells you something about Chung's ability to write a good character. That ability led to a humanization of events in the distant past that, frankly, I didn't know a whole lot about. And I feel like these are the reasons that we read, so that we can learn about this type of thing, since we couldn't have been there, and it's not going to happen again, or at least it shouldn't. While I have not yet participated in my book club discussion about this book, I think this is a great one if you want a story that gives you a lot to dig into. It's not the best historical fiction ever, but it is a book that really makes you think about some of the events in the past history of the world and how much impact that has had on culture, and people who we live in the world with today are people who have been impacted by these events. As I finish the audiobook, I always think about the rating I'm going to give the story, and I was torn between a 4 and a 4.5. Ultimately, I'm landing on a 4.5, and I think the thing that really pushed this book to a 4.5 for me versus a 4 is the fact that this is this author's first novel. Had this been a veteran author, I would probably say this was a 4. But given that Chung has never written a novel before and how deeply personal this book is, I think she deserves a higher rating than that. I really was impressed. It does not read like a first novel. I'm sure that this is going to be one of the less popular books that I've reviewed of late, but if you've read it, let me know in the comments. And if you do decide to pick it up as a result of this review, let me know that too. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if anyone has discussed this with a book club in particular, keep me posted about that as well. Again, sometimes we need to be reminded of books that we wouldn't ordinarily choose on our own, so perhaps my review can do for you what my book club's pick has done for me. But remember, you might love what I hate and hate what I love, so make your own opinion, but thanks for listening to mine. See you next time.